Hi y'all, and welcome back to the garden. I haven't been out here a whole lot over the past week because it's been like 1,000,000 degrees of raining, and it even come a frog strangler today, as we call it. It rained really hard, but I'm going to take you around and show you a few things that are blooming, that are looking pretty good. Some things that I'm considering removing because they just are not doing great. And there was someone asking about the red banana, so I'm gonna go take you and show you it right now. It's getting pretty big. It's doubled in size since I planted it. You can actually see the original leaves. I picked this up from 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲, and it's called a red obsidian. And this is it right now. So it's probably 5 foot tall, I would say. This tallest point leaf right here, and it's produced, I think it had this leaf on it maybe when it came home, but all of those are new. I really like it right here. It's very nice foliage color against all the other green. And the coneflowers, I think I showed you in a video not too long ago, are just massive. This is a nice variety. This is One in a Melon by Proven Winners, and you can see they come out very yellow. They kind of lose a little bit of their yellow as they age, but they're still a really nice cantaloupe color. So yellow is it's kind of a mix of yellow and orange. Not completely like clear yellow, not orange, kind of a middle tone. So One in a Melon, like a melon color, was, you know, a really good name. Proven Winners is really good at picking names for their varieties. I also posted a picture earlier this week getting some blueberries from my bushel and berry plants. So these are the ones that I moved to this container or this raised bed about 2 years ago now, because our high alkaline soil does not allow blueberries to flourish very well. And they're doing so good. The one that does come out a little pinker in the spring has transitioned to more of a blue tone. So you can see here the different colors there. And I've got some strawberries down here I need to pick. But the blueberries themselves are really tangy and delicious. And this is the biggest they've ever been. So we've had a lot of rain and a lot of water. And that bed is on drip irrigation, so it gets watered pretty frequently along with some other things. But the berries have done pretty good this year. Not a ton of them. They're dwarf variety berries that are kind of meant to be containerized, but they're still really delicious. And if you want to grow blueberries in a container because you have a high alkaline soil, or you just don't want to plant them in the ground, the bushel and berry series is really good. They also have some raspberries, which I've showed on my channel before, some blackberries that are all thornless, so you don't have to worry about the thorns on those. They stay a little smaller. They don't spread quite as vigorously as like traditional raspberries can with their canes. If you're not familiar with raspberries and blackberries, they can, depending on the variety, be kind of vigorous and grow outside of like a raised bed or something. So just kind of have to keep them in check every now and then. But along with all the rain has come lots and lots of weeds, and they're getting out of hand again because I haven't been able to get out here and clean up in the evenings quite as much because it's been so warm or wet. A little update on this tree here. This is an evening light Snowbell that I planted about 1.5 years ago now, I guess, right after this bed was developed. I did have a Carolina Sweetheart redbud here that I had ordered online that died the first winter it was planted because it didn't have a really good root system when it was delivered to me, and all the soil kind of fell off, so it just did not survive the summer and died over winter. And so I planted this in its place, and I've not been super impressed with it. The foliage was supposed to be a darker color, I thought, than it is, and it had some pretty significant, significance a strong word, but it did have some die-off over winter. I need to come through and clip back. It did flush out lots of new leafy growth, so you can kind of see on here what's new, the lighter green stuff. But it's just not the color that I wanted it to be. I was expecting it to be darker, kind of like this 9 bark here. This is a tiny wine 9 bark, so it has dark foliage, and I wasn't expecting it necessarily to be that dark, but what's supposed to be known about the Snowbell is its darker foliage. So I don't know if was labeled wrong at the nursery, or I just had bigger expectations than what I'm seeing here, but it didn't hardly bloom this spring either. I think winter was just really rough on it because it's not as established as a lot of the other things. And so I didn't get any really snowbells on it either. So a little bit disappointed in that variety. And I'm not sure I would recommend it unless I just happen to get a completely wrong variety. If you have a evening light snowbell, I would love to hear your thoughts on it, because I'm not impressed with it so much. This Japanese maple that I showed you last year, Rhode Island Red, died back significantly. I think I'm just going to end up removing it. It did put out a little bit of growth, but over winter, all of this is dead. It's definitely got crispy since then. I was afraid that it might have a little life in it in the spring, so I've kind of left it. I guess I could technically cut all of the dead off and leave like this one struggling branch, but I just don't think it's worth it. Japanese maples grow really slow, and you know, I got this one 50% off, so it wasn't a huge expense, but it's just not worth it leaving it in this condition in the garden. So that one will probably come out over the next couple weeks. I still have not got out here to tie up my dahlias. So after all the rain that we've had, they're looking pretty pitiful and fallen over. But we're getting lots of really good ones. So I think this one's like Pin Hill watermelon. So there are a lot on here. They're really tall, really striking. Let's see if I can turn around here and see how big that bloom is. Get my hand up here. So this is my hand. You can see how big that is. Got lots of more pretty ones around here. I need to come through and deadhead some of them though. This is not a typical Matthew garden. It's usually more tidy than this. I've just not had the capacity to get out here. But if I don't, I'm afraid these tubers are going to break or break off at the ground, and as much rain as we're getting, we'll have issues with them rotted. So I just need to come in here and tie them up with some tomato tie tape, so they'll be a little happier and won't be falling all over the place. I'm getting berries on this Hypericum, or St. John's wort from Monrovia. There was a yucca planted here that had kind of traveled. I think it was more in this location, and it's kind of moved around. And I removed it earlier this year, and it's come back again. But these berries are really striking this time of year. This is Brigadoon St. John's wort as well, and it is starting to spread. So I had a viewer recommend this to me, and now that I've planted it, I'm just going to caution you that it is a spreader. So look how far over it's come, and right there it's come up, and I actually saw it, and I pulled the leaves off of it here, popping up as well. So this is one that is not wanting to stay in its spot, and I would probably contain it somewhere because it seems to be a pretty vigorous spreader. I mean, this was just planted last year, in the fall of last year. I think I showed you when I planted it, and this is pretty significant, like, root spreading in only a, you know, I guess that'd be 8 or 9 months, but over winter. The arborvitae did completely die, so I just need to pull that out of the ground. I could probably grab it and pull it up right now because it probably did not get established very well. I had a lot of you mention that you thought this Salvia right here, this is blue suede shoes, was chlorosis. And I would agree with you, but I have never, not once, experienced chlorosis in my garden with any plant ever. And it's snapping out of it on its own, and I've not given it any water. I think maybe this area of the garden gets more water overspray from the sprinkler head, and this side would not. And so I think when we had that drought, they were just struggling a little bit, because without any additional fertilizer, these are putting on lots of good looking growth. You can see how much better that looks now. And these zinnias, not zinnias, sun patience, are incredible. These have hardly had any water, and they're doing so much better than these in here. But there could also be an issue here because they're also smaller. Those look good. Those down there are also growing quite well. So there could be potentially an issue here with some type of nutrient deficiency. I think I'm going to keep it and just see if it works through them right now. I'm not going to provide any additional fertilizer, and this will be like a test to see if these snap out of it. But the weeds in this bed, even though I put down so much mulch, and maybe it's because the soil was so disturbed here, are pretty significant. This Magnolia is still looking really, really great. It's thickening up quite a lot. Tons of new growth I've showed you before, but even since I showed you in the last video, these have put on and opened up a ton of leaves. It's much fuller at the top already. So this is a good variety. This is Bracken's Brown Beauty in Southwest Ohio. This is one of, I think, maybe 2 varieties that do well up here. The other one's called 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲, I think. But this one's just growing really good in its first season. Also, these Hypericum from First Edition shrubs, some of these I gave away earlier this year. This is called Cobalt and Gold. You can see how striking blue color this foliage is. Next to the alliums, they're kind of similar there, but this is a more colored green here on the Sun Patience. And they're starting to bloom, which means they'll be putting on some tiny berries here soon, but they're kind of like a rosemary looking color and similar textured leaf as rosemary. So maybe a good option if you want some rosemary looking plants that might be a little more friendly to your garden depending on what area of the country you're in. And these Fire Chief arborvitae are also winners in my book. You know, I was hesitant to plant these because they just did not kind of suit me initially the first few years I saw them, but after I've gotten them in the garden, they're such a striking color. I mean, you could see the difference. They just stand out really easily. Really easy to care for, and they put on this much growth this season. All of these new sprigs here, you can see how far out are fresh growth, because these were planted just this year and they were kind of tiny. I posted a video, I think, or showed you how I was going to plant these, and they're doing really well, really well. If I was going to recommend a mountain hydrangea to plant in your garden right now, it would be Tough Stuff 𝗂𝗂. I've showed you these over the past few weeks from virtually no blooms. These were transplanted last year to this location, by the way. They were previously in the backyard, received too much sun. Here they get morning eastern sun, and they are blowing me away. Like, this is a beautiful hedge of 1 and 1.5 foot tall hydrangeas here. They bloom on new wood as well. So despite it getting to -5 to -10 here, the really cold weather we had between Christmas and New Year's, these are blooming their heads off, and they'll continue to produce buds throughout the summer. But you can see how big these infertile florets have gotten on some of these older blooms here, and they're still just producing lots more buds at these terminal shoots here over the next several weeks. Here's one under here as well. So this one's doing much better than Tiny Tough Stuff for me, blooming, that is. And I wanted to show you these hydrangeas. These are Bloomstruck by Endless Summer, and they're actually a little purple. I poured a ton of soil acidifier down on top of these before I dressed this location with mulch a couple months ago now, and some of them are actually turning blue. So this is Pop Star right here, the smaller one. I never did come through and cut off these stems yet. I did have a viewer say to wait and cut those off till later, but these stems aren't coming back. I mean, look at them. They're dead. They need to be cut back. These do bloom on old and new wood, but the old wood was dead. So they're looking really good on all the new growth. You can actually see under here down to where the wood is still alive and the new growth is pushing out. This is fairly common anyway on some of these hydrangeas that rebloom. A lot of macrophyllus, in our locations anyway, they are going to probably have some dieback, and you'll need to come through and trim. But you do need to wait until they start producing new foliage and give it a little bit, and then you can come through and cut these back a little bit. So right now it's July. If this stem was going to leaf out, it would have already, but right now you can see dead. Just needs to be cut back. The Let's Dance Can Do, I'll just give you an update on these in lots of videos because these are still doing really good. You can see some of the blooms are aging. We did have some really hot weather and I forgot to water a few days, so they're looking a little rough, but producing new buds already. So we've got some new growth in here all over these plants about to produce and rebloom. You could come through now if you wanted to and cut off and deadhead these older blooms. That would be fine directly below here to the next terminal location right above these leaves. And the last update, this 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 hydrangea hedge has started to change from its white to a more papery, not quite papery. It's still kind of soft. So you could trim these. I might give these a little more time, but if you gave them and put them in water, these would probably be okay. And we just had a huge downpour today, and you can see some of the lower limbs that weren't braced as good are falling over, but the bracing that I had performed earlier this season has helped these so much this year, and I'm so glad I did that. You can see how big these blooms are compared to my hand. And you know I told you these smell, but bees love them as well. You can see it's full of pollinators over here flying around, pollinating all of these little florets that are kind of hidden behind the petals here. Lots of bugs. That's a good thing, right? So, thanks for following along this far. If you have, here's some exciting news. I am going to Michigan this coming week to tour Spring Meadow Nurseries and Walter's Gardens with lots of other people from Instagram and YouTube. We were invited out by proven winners, and I'm really excited. I've wanted to tour the facilities for a long time. You know, I've taken you kind of behind the scenes to lots of garden centers. I took you earlier this season to Stock Slaggers in like March when they were sticking the annuals to grow them on to sale in early, late spring. And now I'm really excited to tour the facilities of where all of these plants, or a lot of the plants that I plant, come from, because they do really well in our zone. They're grown right there in Michigan, or they're initially stuck right there in Michigan and get shipped across the country to nurseries that continuously grow those on for you guys, and then they get shipped out to other garden centers for sale. So that'll be an exciting adventure for me this week. So stay tuned. If you're not following me on Instagram, of course, follow me there. I'll be sharing some stories and some photos along the way. And then I'll try and take some footage for you, because I'm going to be taking and going through the display gardens up there, picking out some beautiful things that I could add to my garden later that I know will grow well in our zone. Thanks for following along, guys. And remember, in a world full of hate, be a light. Take care. Bye.